Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. Through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets. I hope you'll still want me, I hope you'll still need me a million years from now. The seasons are changing, the nights ever fading. It's time we left the ground. Let's leave for an eternity. We'll sail across the lights beyond the sky. I'll be with you eternally. I'm an addict for your love, it keeps me high, keeps me high. Can I be your star tonight? You fill my soul with light the day we met. I don't wanna leave your side, no. Have me by your side when the sun sets. I hope you'll still want me, I hope you'll still need me a million years from now. The seasons are changing, the nights ever fading. It's time we left the ground. Let's leave for an eternity. We'll sail across the lights beyond the sky. I'll be with you eternally. I'm an addict for your love, it keeps me high, keeps me high. I hope you'll still want me, I hope you'll still need me a million years from now. The seasons are changing, the nights ever fading. It's time we left the ground. Sometimes I have to keep on breathing in. My lungs are filled with too much pain. All the shadows of the past that I'm so leaving, they held me in my sleepless nights. And I'm running in the noise like a free fall, walking along my path for too long. Save myself from the visions in my mind. Save myself from what I have to fight. And I can take it all away. All of my dreams are fading. Save myself from the visions in
Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. How are we? How are we going? So can everyone hear me okay? Everyone can see me okay? All right. So yeah, hopefully everyone can see me okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Yeah. Welcome along. What I'm going to do, guys, is we will get started obviously on lecture 6. So we're going to be pushing forward, looking at the GI tract. Obviously, this won't be a part of your mid-sem. Also, too, with regards to your exams or anything like that, I will be talking to you guys about that in your tute workshops, just because I think that's a little bit of a more appropriate medium. It's a little bit easier for you guys to ask me questions back and stuff like that. So hopefully you guys all got my email regarding that. Yeah, and without further ado, let us get started. I want this one. There we go. Excellent. My links are still working. Good. I fixed up my macros a little bit, so they're working a little bit better. Oh, excuse me. So guys, what are we doing today? What's the game plan? So we're finished looking at the heart and we're finished looking at the lungs. So the heart and the lungs were incredibly tightly linked in terms of their function. Okay, so both those systems worked very, very closely together. Obviously, they are not the only two body systems in existence. So what we're going to do now is expand our horizons, and we're going to be looking at the GIT, the gastrointestinal tract. This is going to be sort of a 2-week module in which we look at the GIT and we look at nutrition and metabolism. Because why? Well, we need fuel. This is what all of this comes down to with the GIT, is that we need a way to fuel and power our system. It's all well and good to have the best factory in the whole wide world. Let's say we are getting error messages. Oh god, there we go. So sorry, guys. Where was I? Yes, Tesla. So let's say we're Tesla and we've got their massive like gigafactory things. We need to power it. It still needs electricity. You can have the best factory in the world, but ultimately, if you don't have power running through it, you can't do anything. You can't achieve anything. And it's the same with our body. We can have the most efficient, cardiorespiratory system and, the best, biggest brain in the whole wide world. We can go big brain time. But at the end of the day, if we don't have any power, it's not going to work. So we're going to talk today about how we get that power and how we are able to then transform what we eat into either fuel or into resources. So, because we obviously need materials. You can't build a house on just hopes and dreams. You need materials in order to build it together. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to be looking at the physiological process involved in digestion, absorption, and excretion. So keeping in mind that digestion and absorption are different things. But again, we're going to talk about that. We're going to be looking at motility through the GIT, okay? Things need to move. It doesn't just sit in one magic pit in the stomach and then just things happen, okay? It's constantly moving through our system. We're going to be exploring that. We're going to be looking at various secretions. So what are we releasing from the body into our GIT to help this process occur? And we're going to be looking at some of the major nutrients and vitamins. I'm going to be incredibly brief with that last point because I feel it's a little bit more appropriate to discuss that next week when we do a little bit more of the chemistry behind it. I will keep the chemistry to a minimum, I promise. A little bit. So as usual, guys, I will be keeping an eye on what you guys are posting on the side here. Keeping in mind, too, that, yes, this is being recorded, obviously, because I'm going to be streaming it directly to YouTube and saving it there. However, I will be blocking the chat. So whatever you guys are posting in here, that will not be able to be viewed again. So something I'll need to get in the habit of is that if you do ask a question, for me to verbally repeat it so that when you're rewatching this video, you'll know what the question is. Okay. So the terms digestive system, gastrointestinal system, GIT, these are all used interchangeably. What does that mean? They're all referring to the same thing. Okay, I want you to picture this as like a donut. Okay, it is a hole. Basically, when food goes in our mouth and it works all, okay, it goes in our mouth down here. Let me go to my laser pointer. Here we go. Okay, and goes all the way through and out to the exterior here. This is not technically inside of us. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, picture a donut, okay? If you have a donut, okay, with a hole in the middle, if I'm holding the donut like this, okay, and my fingers are going through the hole of the donut, my fingers aren't technically inside of the donut, okay? That's sort of what we're seeing here. So even though we have, say, ingested something, it needs to move from our GIT into our body, which is what we are doing with absorption. We are grabbing that stuff and absorbing it through. Also, Alicia, how's your internet going? Are you still having issues? I know you were having issues with Zoom. Are you having issues with YouTube, or is that going okay for you? Now, with the GIT, we have some of the primary things with our GIT. So, looking at our mouth, our pharynx, looking at the esophagus. Okay, so not the trachea. Okay, food does not want to go in there. If it's going in there, you're having a bad time. It's then going to move down to your stomach, your intestines, blah blah blah. Now we also have accessory digestive organs. Now these accessory organs aren't sort of directly involved in this tract, but they do help out. So things like the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas, do they have a role in digestion, or do they have a role in the GIT? Absolutely yes, but they are accessory. They are helping out. I've since upgraded my internet. So far, so good. Oh, that is wonderful news. Okay, an upgraded internet. It's like a new phone. It's wonderful. It makes you feel good. At least it does for me. So, what are some of our functions here when we're looking at our GIT? And again, we're sort of trying to do a bit of a generalized introduction, and we're going to take all of these things and sort of pick them apart and break them down even further, kind of like our GIT system. Ingestion, okay, what could be for a lot of people is the favorite part of the GIT, and that is eating the foods. Okay, that's often the good part. Now we've got secretions. We are releasing different substances. Then we focus on breaking down, and then we're extracting all the good stuff and anything that we don't want, anything that's in excess, or us then removing some of our garbage, some of our waste. Back into the intestines, and then it's eliminated as waste and is removed. Okay. Now, another image that can be overwhelming would be the best way to say it. Now, this again, it's like the heart. When we first looked at the all the different structures and all the different labels that we saw with the heart, it could be very overwhelming. It's sort of like, whoa, there are so many different things here. But what's going to happen is once we break it down a little bit, we spend a bit of time on it, it's not going to be as scary, okay? Now, straight from the get-go, I will require you all to know pretty much all of these. With the exception of probably these specific salivary glands. For my purposes and what I'm trying to teach you in this course, just knowing the salivary glands is perfectly fine. I'm not going to specifically expect you to know each of the three salivary glands. Although if you want to learn them, I mean, that's pretty dope. I'm not going to say no. Oh, hey Sayed, mate, how you going? yeah, so I'm not going to, you know, expect you to know those three. However, everything else is fair game. And again, basically our game plan for today is we are going to start up here. Now, again, this is going to be good because we have touched on a lot of those things last week and the week before when we were looking at respiratory, okay? Sort of like the pharynx, looking at the nasopharynx and the oropharynx. We're going to be looking at that again when we start with the mouth because it's a shared structures back here. And basically our game plan is to start from the top and we're going to work our way down to the bottom here. Now, general histology. Who can remind me? It's been like a week or two since I've asked you this question, so we all should be experts at this by now. What does the word histology mean? Who can remind me? Anyone remember what histology means? Hey, excellente. Well done, guys. Yes, it's looking at different tissues, okay? And that is essentially what we are doing here when we are looking at our GI tract. There are four main layers here. We have the mucosa, the submucosa, our smooth muscle, and the serosa. These are the four main layers here, and that's what we can see here when we're looking at sort of a cross-section of the GIT. We've got this mucosa, submucosa, muscularis layer, and the serosa. So our mucosal layer, this innermost part, okay, has our epithelium. Okay, so this is mostly simple columnar. Okay, so they look like little cubes. And of course, our goblet cells. So remembering that a goblet cell is a cell that predominantly will secrete mucus. Okay, this is very good for ensuring pH balance in the body, or in our GIT, I should say rather, and of course to help lubricate and move things around. Now, within this mucosal layer, okay, within this mucosal layer, we've got that epithelial tissue, which I just explained earlier. We also have this lamina propria. Now, this contains a lot of this loose areolar connective tissue, which again, it's probably one of the most abundant connective tissues in the body. And it also contains a lot of capillaries here for nourishment and absorption, okay? Because again, this is one of the major purposes of our GIT, okay? Is to be able to break down and absorb a lot of those nutrients and materials. Because at the end of the day, guys, that's kind of what we're here to do, is that we want to try and absorb as much energy and nutrients as we can. Now, the next layer we have here is our submucosa. So this has a lot of this dense connective tissue. It has glands, okay? We've also got our submucosal plexus network, which helps to control a lot of these different secretions. We've got smooth muscle, okay? This helps us to undergo peristalsis. So just a quick reminder, peristalsis is the rhythmatic contraction that will allow it to, allow these, what are essentially tubes, to squeeze and push substances across. So again, like peristalsis, if I was to do that, it's sort of like rhythmatic contraction, and that's pushing substances in one direction. So a good example of peristalsis, if you get stuck, is just swallowing, okay? If you take a sip of water, that rhythmatic contraction of my esophagus and my awful beard here. I made a promise to my mate I wouldn't shave while we're in quarantine, so that's it. And that rhythmatic contraction as it's pushing that substances down my esophagus and into my stomach, that is peristalsis. Now, we do not have... We can initiate peristalsis, but once it's going, we cannot stop it. Why? Because it is smooth muscle, and we do not have voluntary control over smooth muscle. And of course, the last outermost layer that we have here is our serosa. So the serosa here, it essentially connects our GIT to the peritoneum. Basically, it needs to hold it together. Now, again, guys, just to further remind you all, if you do have any questions, if there's something I'm saying that's not going a bit too fast or too slow or whatever, please let me know. I'm keeping an eye on your guys' comments as we're moving along. So this is essentially the same thing that we were looking at here. It's just a different perspective, a different angle than what we were looking at over here. Now, what we're looking at over here is essentially in our mucosal layer. What is happening is that we have our nutrients that has been broken down, okay, has been effectively digested. And what is then happening is it is then being absorbed. It's moving through this microvilli, moving through this epithelial layer that we were talking about before. And what we can see here is this lamina propria that we have down here, and is then having access to either our lymphatic capillaries here, with the lymphatic system, which again I'm going to explain to you in a moment, is responsible for transporting our fat. And we also have our blood capillaries, okay? There's a great degree of blood supply, as you can sort of see on this image down here, because, again, we remind ourselves of what the function of this is. What do we want this to do? We are wanting to absorb all of these nutrients and all of these material, all of these different substances. Okay, so why do we need a big blood supply? Well, once we've absorbed it, what do we do with it? We don't just sort of, just leave it in the GI tract. We need to deliver it, okay? We need to deliver it and transport it around the body. And that's where that blood supply comes in. It's picking it up and transporting it. Okay, whoops. So we have four main layers. So we have the mucosa, the submucosa, the smooth muscle, and the serosa. So when we're looking at this nutrient absorption, the substances will need to move across this mucosal layer, okay? Because as I was showing over here, this mucosal layer, it's then crossing through there into this lamina propria and into our capillary or the lymphatic capillary there, depending on what the substance is, in order to be absorbed and to be transported. I'm not going to focus too much about this, but essentially the peritoneum or the peritoneal cavity is where all of these bits and bobs are kept. So we can see just by this nice little schematic here, this is our vertebra. So this is where looking sort of top down. This is our peritoneal cavity, and this is where all of the bits and bobs of our GIT is essentially stored. Okay, so let's start from the top, shall we? Let's start from the top and work our way down. Now, again, another scary image. A lot of things with lots of bits and bobs. This one I'm not too worried about. Don't worry about a lot of these things that are being labeled and pointed out here. There are a couple that I will point out to you all specifically. But a lot of these things we do already know. So the one probably big one is the uvula. Okay, probably a new one. Okay, this is the big dangly bit that hangs out in the back of your throat. And essentially it separates that the nasopharynx from our oropharynx back here. What else do we have here that I would like you to know? Obviously, this just whopping great, huge muscle structure here, which, you don't really appreciate how big it is until you see it from this sagittal section. And that is the tongue, okay? Tongue is huge. There's a brilliant MRI GIF that's circling around. I can't remember if I've got it saved. I'm sure I do. It's basically an MRI, and this person is talking while this MRI is going, and you can see the just sheer precise movements of this uvula and the tongue and moving around. It's absolutely insane. It's magnificent. If I do find it, I'll try and post it on on the Moodle or something like that. What are the main things that I would expect you guys to know here? Okay, I would expect you guys to know, obviously, the uvula. I would expect you guys to know the tongue. Okay, if we can't identify the tongue, well, I'm concerned. The epiglottis, which again we've already covered that in the lungs, and the laryngopharynx and the oropharynx. We've already covered all of those. Okay, and of course we can see here the separation of the trachea and the esophagus. So in weeks 4 and a little bit in 5, I guess, we focused on this pathway, okay, looking at the trachea. Today we're taking the other route, okay, we're going down here. Now, of course, we also within the mouth have these whopping great chompers called teeth. Teeth are incredibly important here because they are the first stage of our digestion, and this is a mechanical digestion. Now, these two words, mechanical digestion and chemical digestion, are things I'm going to be talking about a lot for the next 2 weeks, so this week and next week. Mechanical digestion is using force, okay? Mechanical, using force to break down and digest food. So when you are eating something, okay, let's say you take a bite of an apple or something like that. You take a bite and the first thing you're going to do is chew, and that is mechanically ripping and breaking apart that food into smaller pieces. Chemical digestion is using chemistry to break things down. So this is using things like acids or breaking it apart using enzymes, okay? So this is not using force. This is using chemistry to break it down. Oh, thank you. Thank you, my calendar app, for reminding me that I have class right now. Very kind of you. So, in the mouth up here, we do both mechanical and chemical digestion. So the mechanical and chemical digestion. So the mechanical digestion here, that is what our teeth are doing. They are pushing down, they are crunching, they are grinding, they are tearing and breaking the food apart with the help of the tongue. The tongue also helps in mechanical digestion. And this can be things like using the tongue to push and smear food against the rough upper part of the top of your palate, okay? So sort of like, if you eat peanut butter, you will be very aware of how much peanut butter gets stuck at the top of your mouth. Now, we also undergo chemical digestion. So saliva is incredibly important for our GIT. It's also important for digestion. It's also important for, keeping the mouth healthy. So we produce a lot of saliva, okay? We produce 1 to 1.5 liters of the stuff. Now, there is a lot of water within saliva. It also contains an enzyme called salivary amylase. So, salivary obviously means saliva. Amylase, this is an enzyme that I will expect you to know. I will expect you to memorize this. Amylase is responsible for breaking down carbohydrates. So, there's a key part to this word. Chemistry likes to break sort of sections of a word into sort of different sections. So if we see a word, and this is for the most part, there are a few exceptions to this. If we see a word that ends in A's, so amylase, protease, these sorts of words, if it ends in ASE, this means it is an enzyme. So salivary amylase means that it is an enzyme, so A's, that is found in the saliva and it breaks down carbohydrates. Now, it also contains like some immunoglobulins and stuff like that. I'm not going to go too much into that. Now, salivation is triggered by taste, smell, sight, or even the thought of food. This part's cool. Like, this is where like Pavlov's experiments came in. So if you haven't heard of Pavlov, basically what he did was he proved that it did not rely upon the physical detection of food to trigger this salivation. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, what Pavlov did was that he had dogs. I can't remember the breeds, but anyway. And what he did was every time he went to give them dinner, he rang a bell. So he rang a bell and then gave the dogs dinner. Then he rang a bell and gave the dogs dinner, rang a bell, gave them dinner. And he did this for a couple of weeks. And what the dogs essentially did was they associated the ringing of that bell with, oh, I'm going to get me some food. Okay. And what he noticed was that he rang the bell, but he didn't give the dogs food. He wasn't cooking food. He didn't have food anywhere nearby. And what he found was that the dogs were producing a lot of saliva. And this is basically saying that it's triggered by our parasympathetic nervous system, and that it can even be detected by the thought of food. Knowing that food is on its way is enough to trigger this. Okay, actually, sorry, 2 seconds. There we go. Sorry, it just got quite dark here all of a sudden. That's a little bit better. Okay. Now, let us talk a little bit about the teeth, which again, I'm not going to spend too much time on. So what we have here are 3 main types of teeth. We have our incisors, okay? I want to go this one here. So we have our incisors. These incisors are sort of, these are our front parts here, and these are good for cutting and for piercing through things. So like our if we're biting into an apple, we're not like trying to chomp on the side. We will typically use the front part, and bite. We then have our canines. Our canines are on the side. This is if we've got something chewy, we'll typically go sort of 45, and we want to like pull and tear it, okay? These are our canines here. They're sharp and they allow it to sort of hook in and tear and shred. You learned this in psychosocial? Interesting. I did not know that. And we have our premolars and our molars. These are the teeth at the very back here. And again, you'll notice that they are an entirely different structure. These are almost like hammers, okay? They're very large, like wide and flat, and these are just for crushing, okay? Like crush and obviously not twist. Your teeth can't twist around. But this is to crunch and grind. So we've got our cutting, our tearing, and our crushing and grinding. So our teeth are exceptionally good and exceptionally useful at breaking down our various foods mechanically. Am I going to quiz and test you guys on the different breakdowns of teeth? No. Again, you might learn this later on, but you guys aren't sort of becoming dentists or dental nurses, so I'm not going to go too much further into the overall structure of the tooth. Okay, digestion of the mouth. Don't do that. Don't digest your mouth. Your mouth is important. Okay. Digestion within the mouth, again, starts with 2 main phases. We have mechanical and chemical digestion, and these are occurring simultaneously. So while you are chewing food, okay, while you are breaking and tearing it apart, your tongue is also physically moving that food around and spreading it out, and is essentially mixing around with that food in your mouth. And that is mixing it in with amylase, like salivary amylase, and that's helping to break that carbohydrate down. So for instance, if you take a bite of bread, okay, bread also, contains carbohydrates, and if you chew it and you keep chewing it, and I mean chew it for like a couple of minutes, what you will notice is that it will start to taste sweet. Oh, the Pavlov story, right. Okay, no, that makes sense. I was like, you learnt about the structure of teeth, like in psychosocial? Interesting. But yeah, so when we chew and chew bread for a long time, it will start to taste sweet. And the reason for this is because that salivary amylase is actually cutting and breaking up our carbohydrate. Because what makes up a carbohydrate is that it is a long chain of glucose, or a long chain of sugars, I should say, rather. I'm just going to turn my light on really quick. It's just a bit dark here. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. So This is where the chemical digestion starts. So as we begin our journey from the mouth moving down our GIT, we are starting in the mouth, chew, 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 mixing it up with that salivary amylase, and what that is starting to do is start to break down these carbohydrates chemically and starting to break down our food mechanically. Now, with regards to salivary amylase, the digestion of this stops in the stomach, since the stomach acid destroys amylase. So why is it destroyed in the stomach? Because amylase is an enzyme, and enzymes are made up of proteins. And proteins are incredibly susceptible. They're very sensitive to changes in pH. So if you take a protein and you dump it into a pool of acid, i.e. your stomach, then what is going to happen is that protein is going to break and unwind. Okay, so again, chew, 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 mix it around, and then swallow. So what we have now is this bolus, essentially. Okay, so we call just mushed, chewed up food a bolus. And what that is doing is then being sort of pushed down our esophagus and into our stomach. Okay, so that's what we can see here, this bolus. So the top part here is relaxed because it's that rhythmic contraction of our esophagus to push that down into our stomach. So remember, that is called peristalsis. Now, obviously with our throat as well, we rely upon the swallowing of saliva to help lubricate our throat, and it also does produce some mucus there to help ease things down. So, chew, 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 swallow, then plop. What happens? That bolus is then going to land itself into our stomach. Now, the stomach is located just under our diaphragm, and we have a couple of other layers, mainly with our smooth muscle. So what you will notice here is that when we looked at the histology of our GIT before, okay, those four main layers, with our smooth muscle in the GIT, it only really has one main layer because it's only having to contract in one direction, whereas our stomach is moving in many different directions. This is why your stomach sort of grumbles when you're hungry. Excuse me. Now, one thing I do definitely want to point out is that if you look down here, what we see here is this rugae. So this simple columnar epithelium, it has really large folds, and how I want you to picture this is almost like a really, almost like sandpaper. And what that does is that it has this really rough, coarse surface, so that as your stomach is moving and pushing things around, it's sort of grinding against that rugae, and it's helped to spread things out and sort of further break down these things that we have just eaten, because again, we are undergoing more mechanical digestion, more chemical digestion. So we want to try and break it down as much as possible. And my phone is not on silent. How rude of me. My goodness. Now, looking at the stomach, okay, we have a couple of really important cell types that we need to look at here, especially with our histology of the stomach. There are a couple here. One is our chief cells. So what chief cells do is that they are going to produce an enzyme called pepsinogen. And pepsinogen eventually gets converted into pepsin. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a moment. Our parietal cells here, it releases or produces hydrochloric acid. So it is our parietal cells that's very important for creating that stomach acid. Oh, I can't shake these hiccups. I'm so sorry. And of course, we also release intrinsic factor. Now, intrinsic factor is an important thing that's secreted by the stomach, and ultimately it helps in the absorption of vitamin B12. I'm not going to go too much into the specifics of intrinsic factor. All I want you to do is just be able to link or understand that intrinsic factor has a role with absorption of vitamin B12. And our G cells here, okay, what they do is they produce gastrin. Now, gastrin kind of kickstarts everything, okay? So gastrin will assist in the release of these gastric juices. It increases that gastric motility. It basically is like the big bell, okay? The big alarm bell that says, all right, everyone, wake up, quick, we've got food on the way, food's coming, let's go, okay? Let's get ready. So this is what we can see here. I would expect you guys to know what a chief cell, parietal cell, and G cell does. And we also have mucus cells, which of course they secrete mucus. So we see these little gastric pits that are present in the stomach. And again, that's where these cell types exist, and they we can see their. So we're in the stomach, okay? We've got our G cells that are basically going, hey, whoa, okay, we've got food in here, let's go. We then have our chief cells that are going, righto, let's release pepsinogen, and pepsinogen gets converted to pepsin. And what pepsin does is it helps to break down proteins, okay? It'll take proteins and chop them up. So in the same way, like with amylase, how amylase sort of was chopping up carbohydrates, with pepsin, it is chopping up proteins. I'm missing one. Oh, right, I didn't explain parietal cells. And of course, like we need this acidity. We don't need to go 100% all out and producing heaps and heaps and heaps of hydrochloric acid all of the time. So what our parietal cells will do is that when we obviously have those bolus, which is now chyme in the stomach, it's going to release more and more hydrochloric acid to obviously help replenish it. So again, we've got this mechanical digestion, okay, this moving and grinding things around, okay, and this basically just awful mix of food is called chyme, okay. This is when it's been mixed down with these gastric juices. Now, the hydrochloric acid that we see here released from our parietal cells, what does this do? It does a whole myriad of different things. One very important part that we have already discussed is it will help to kill down microbes. So for instance, when let's say like we've got a chest infection or something like that, those white blood cells are helping to remove any bacteria and nasty stuff. And what it will do is it will just deposit it into the stomach and basically just destroy it. It will denature our proteins, basically cause our proteins, because these are like almost like a Lego building, okay? They're very delicately folded and held together, okay? Once we pop that into acid, it just kind of completely unfolds and completely breaks. What else we got? Making enzymatic proteolysis easier. Whoa, so many syllables. Big words. Enzymatic. Enzymatic just simply means using an enzyme. Proteolysis. What does proteolysis mean? Proteo basically means protein, and lysis means to split, to break apart. So proteolysis, protein splitting. It means to break up proteins. Now, unfortunately, a bit of a casualty of that is that salivary amylase, that what is essentially a protein that was in our saliva, help breaking down those carbohydrates in the mouth, that gets destroyed as well. And what we do is we basically break down that salivary amylase and we recycle it. Okay, gastric motility and emptying. What is happening here? So our stomach is constantly moving and grumbling and shuffling things around. Okay, so what's going to happen is that we have this pyloric valve, okay, our pyloric sphincter. And what is happening is that will be closed so that basically things don't just go whee and basically just go straight through the stomach and straight into the intestines. That's not what we want, so that will remain shut to basically close this off. Now, what's going to happen then is that obviously we don't want to keep things in our stomachs indefinitely. We don't want it to just be there full stop. We need it to keep moving through. We just want to continue some chemical and mechanical digestion in that stomach. Not to mention too is that we don't want all of this, even if it's sort of been in there for a little bit, we don't want all of that to just go flooding through, because remember, this is incredibly acidic now. Okay, our stomach is capable of dealing with very low pH, so very acidic environment. The rest of us, no, it's not. Okay, that can do some real damage. This is why a lot of people who unfortunately like suffer from they're bulimic. Okay, they force vomiting constantly in trying to lose weight. What you can actually see is basically chemical burns down their esophagus, because they're constantly making themselves vomit, and what that is doing is that your esophagus is not capable of dealing with such acidity, and it'll actually get damaged. So to come back down here, okay, it's mixing. So we've got this propulsion, grinding, and then retropulsion. Okay, so it's just basically the stomach sort of jumbling and moving things around. And then what's going to happen here is that we take a little part, and this pyloric valve will slightly open, and a little bit of that chyme will move out. So just a little bit will move out, and the rest of it will stay in the stomach, and then a little bit will leak out. And the reason for that is that we can gradually control how much is leaving the stomach and entering our intestines. Is everyone following along so far? Is that making sense, guys? Again, please let me know if it's not making sense, or if we need it explained again or anything like that. So, awesome. So guys, that's what we've done so far with our stomach. From there, let's say we're up here, and we've now moved forward. We've moved through this pyloric sphincter, this pyloric valve here, into the duodenum. Oh, what am I saying here? Oh, my goodness me. I will talk about that a little bit later on. So, in our journey, we've gone, we've chew, swallow. Let me do this. Actually, here we go. We're chew, swallow. We move down the esophagus into the stomach. And then in the stomach, we've got, we're being jumbled around. We're being smashed against that rugae there. Okay, we're coming into contact with all that hydrochloric acid. Things are being broken down further. And then what's happening is that we then move through that pyloric sphincter, which is just here, into our duodenum. Now, once we enter this duodenum here, this is where a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff does happen, and a lot of these mechano and chemoreceptors. Oh, good. Mechanoreceptors and these chemoreceptors are detecting that sort of small snippet of chyme moving through into our duodenum. So remembering our mechanoreceptors, that is detecting force. So if that is being stretched, okay, or something is pushing against it, the mechanoreceptors are going to detect that, and our chemoreceptors are going to, detect importantly a very strong change in pH, and also the various chemicals that are found in our in that chyme that's moved through. And what that is going to do is and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on today, and definitely next week, is that it's going to then stimulate the liver, the pancreas, and if you have one, the gallbladder, to really kick into gear and start to secrete further gastric juices, so these pancreatic juices and bile, into our duodenum to help continue that chemical digestion. Let me see. How about Before we push forward with the small intestines, let's have a very quick 5-minute break, okay? Stand up, stretch your legs, grab a quick drink of water, top up your cup of coffee, most importantly. And what we will do is in about 5 minutes, we will continue on with our journey through the GIT.
Call me up when you're sober, when you showered and changed. You give it up like it's over, but never give it away. And I don't wanna fall for you this time. I can't find the truth in all the lies. If I could, I would believe me. If I could, I wouldn't need you. I don't wanna fall for you this time. Call me up when you're sober, when you showered and changed. You give it up.
Alrighty, crew, let's get back into it, shall we? Okay. So, where were we? Let me go back to... Uh-oh. Oh, no, what have I done? I've hit the wrong button. There we go. So where were we? We were... It started at the mouth, chew, chew, swallow, okay? Mixing around that saliva, getting those salivary amylase kicking in. Then we've gone into the stomach, where it has then moved and pushed in things around, hitting that rugae, okay? Further mechanical digestion there. Then what is happening there, it's also mixing around with that hydrochloric acid, getting very nice and acidic. Then, after being moved around there, we're then moved through into the duodenum. And this is where we begin our journey of the small intestines. Okay, so there are three main sections here. We've got our duodenum here. We've got our jejunum. Okay, then it connects down to the ileum. Now, from the pyloric sphincter, so the pyloric sphincter is what we saw over here that connected the stomach to the duodenum. And then that ileocecal valve, okay, now the hint is in the name here, that connects the ileum, which is the last part of the small intestines, to our cecum, which is our the first part of the large intestines. Now, what we see here that is occurring in the duodenum, as well as that we still have that rhythmatic, that peristaltic rhythmatic constriction or contraction rather, to help mix and push the that chyme through our small intestines. But it's very much so now that we really start to see more absorption taking place. However, we still have a lot of chemical digestion to go. So, looking a little bit into the histology of our small intestines, okay? They are lined with simple columnar epithelial cells, okay? These are specialized for absorption, to be able to pick up on those key nutrients there and absorb them through. Oh, my apologies, guys. I've just got a bit of a dry cough. So, it also contains a lot of mucus cells. It takes those goblet cells because, again, we still need to release that mucus there to help lubricate the contents of our intestines there to help propel it along. Now, we have these villi, and we also have microvilli, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But what the villi and the microvilli do is they really help to increase that surface area, which is incredibly important. We really want to kick up that surface area so we can spread things right out to help improve the... Now, on top of these microvilli, so if I show you here, we have, looking at our small intestines, we see these muscular layers here to, again, ensure that we see that peristalsis occurring. And then what we have here are these villi, and we can see how it's like very wavy. This allows us to increase that surface area without taking up too much area within our gut. Now, on top of these little villi, we have microvilli. So on these villi, we have our microvilli, and on top of our microvilli, as you can see across here, we have brush border enzymes. So these are enzymes that are present on top of those microvilli, and what they do is that as the food is moving through and it's coming into contact with those brush border enzymes here, as it's coming into contact with it, it's then further breaking down and facilitating further absorption. Now, looking at absorption in the small intestines and looking at how that works, okay? It is achieved via simple diffusion, okay? So it can actually pass through. We also have active transport, in which we are using energy to pull things through our GIT. And of course, we also have osmosis. This allows us to help absorb water. So what do we normally see that's absorbed here? We see monosaccharides. Now again, another big word. What does monosaccharide mean? So mono means one, and saccharide is sugar. So monosaccharide is one sugar. So this could be like glucose. Whereas, say, sucrose, which is or mannose, for instance. That's where we have multiple sugars joined together. So that would be like a disaccharide. Okay. Now, monoglyceride, again, that's what we're trying to break everything down into. We've got our fatty acids. So if you eat something fatty, it will break it down into those fatty acid forms. We have electrolytes, so things like salts. And of course, we have our vitamins. Now, again, that intrinsic factor that we saw in our stomach, this is where we see that starting to play a role in terms of helping us to absorb that vitamin B12. And of course, we also have water, okay? Obviously, we also get water from our drink bottle. But we also get a lot of our water from our metabolism, so undergoing chemical reactions that as a byproduct will release water. And we also get it a lot from our foods. Now, looking at our fats, again, I'm going to talk about this a lot more next week, but what we're looking at here is a big glob of fat. And what we are relying upon is that fat being emulsified. Now, what that means is if you take a big glob of fat, we want to take that one big glob of fat and break it up into little globs. And that's what we're seeing here. This one big fat globule here is being broken down into smaller little blobs. And that makes it a lot easier for pancreatic lipase, for example. So pancreatic means pancreas, lip means lipid, and ase means enzyme. So these are enzymes that help to break down lipids. And because it's pancreatic, it's released from the pancreas. And by breaking it down into these smaller smaller fat droplets, what that allows it to do is that it makes it easier for these enzymes to really get in there and start digesting them, start breaking them down. It can then move into these villi, these microvilli, and will then pass through and then become absorbed. But what is important here, okay, is that we have to package them up. We can't just absorb it and go, be free, and just release it into our bloodstream and away it goes. It doesn't work like that. Firstly, it doesn't get absorbed into our blood network. It moves through the lymphatic network. And secondly, what's very important is that with these fats, they are very hydrophobic. So hydro mean water, phobic mean hating, okay? They're water hating. And because of that, we can't just move it straight into the blood and go, okay, cool, away you go. We need to package them up. So what we do is that we package them up into a protein ball, essentially, and it's going to form these chylomicrons. And what that does is it sort of allows us to move and transport fats around the body, because remembering the main way in which we move things around the body is, of course, the blood. But the issue with the blood is that it is predominantly water. So that's really not going to help us with our lipids. So this is an example here of our lipoproteins. Okay, so these are the chylomicrons that I was explaining before. Okay, so we have these hydrophilic heads and these hydrophobic fatty acid tails. So we take a lot of these sort of triglycerides, we've got some cholesterol, we've got a few proteins here to transport things around. And that's what we can see by this little schematic here. They've got a nice little key here. So these phospholipids are around here. These are our triglycerides that have been moved in and allowed us to sort of transport around. So we have our chylomicrons, we have our VLDL, so very low density lipoproteins. We have our low density lipoproteins, our LDL, and our HDL, our high density lipoproteins. Okay, now that was sort of a brief rundown of the small intestines. I'm really going to talk about the small intestines, especially like the duodenum and that, a lot more when we talk more about our accessory organs. Because as I sort of mentioned sort of here, that, we have a lot of these mechanoreceptors and chemoreceptors, and we see them stimulating the liver and the pancreas. I'm going to talk about those a lot more when we talk about our accessory organs, the liver and the pancreas. Now, our large intestines. Okay, we've got a couple of unique things here. We've got our 10A coils. Okay, these are smooth muscle bands. We've got our hostrae here. These are sort of these pocket-like sacs, which I'm going to show you in an image in a moment. And what's happening here is that these 10A coli, rather, will constrict and form this bit of tension here, and will sort of cause these pocket-like sacs to be formed. And what it does is it sort of it causes these little segmentations, and as one of these holstrums becomes filled, what it will then do is it will allow it to then it'll sort of undergo peristalsis. It'll squeeze up, and it will then allow it to sort of move up to the next one. So a couple of things here that we need to be aware of. We'll get our cecum. This is the very first part of the large intestines, and then we've got the colon. Now, this is where things get nice and a little bit simple. So we've got our cecum. We then have our ascending colon. So it's going up. We then have our transverse colon, so to move, across. And then we have descending colon. Okay, so it's basically up, across, down. Then I've got our sigmoid colon, rectum, and anus. And once we're past there, we're into the exterior. So this is what I was talking about before. So what we've got here is got this 10A coli that is sort of constricting. It's causing that tension there, which is allowing the formation of our holstrum. Now, as we are moving across, we can see that this part has kind of been cut. Okay, it's kind of been removed. Because what we're seeing here, this part here is our ileocecal valve. So this part here is essentially where our small and large intestines will meet. As we then leave the small intestines, we then hit this ileocecal valve, and that will then move into our cecum. And then from there, it will then move upwards, okay, into our ascending colon. It'll then move across to our transverse colon, and then move down our descending colon, then across our sigmoid colon, and then down into the rectum, and of course to the area. Now, what we are seeing here in our large intestines, if we were to try and compare that now to our small intestines. So with small intestines, We're seeing a lot of chemical digestion, and we're seeing a lot of rapid absorption of nutrients. This is where the bulk movement of our proteins and our sugars and our fats and stuff like that, we're trying to scoop up as much things as we can. Now, when we are looking at the large intestines, we still have a slight amount of mechanical digestion occurring there, as in where we see that peristaltic waves churning, mixing, pushing things along. What's also important to note here is that we actually don't have any villi. It's only microvilli, as well as our goblet cells here to help produce that mucus, to lubricate things, move things along. And what is also important here is that we have a chemical process occurring, because this is where a lot of our gut flora, so a lot of our gut bacteria occur. And essentially what can happen is if you have too much carbohydrates, too much sort of these long chain of sugars, if your small intestines is unable to break it down and absorb all of it in time, what will then happen is that and this also occurs with like fibers, which we cannot break down, but the gut flora in that bacteria there absolutely can. So what's then going to happen is that it's then going to move through into that large intestines, and these gut proteins are going to, the gut bacteria is going to basically be able to have a crack at it, and it's going to undergo fermentation. So if any of you have brewed beer or alcohol at home, a large product of that is CO2, and in this case also methane gas, okay? So this is also why a lot of people who have lactose intolerance have a lot of issues with, gut gas, we'll call it, can really suffer a lot of pain there, because what's happening is that it's, the small intestines there is unable to break down and absorb the lactose sugar. So what's happening there is that as it's getting to the large intestines, this bacteria is getting to it, but it's also producing a lot of CO2 and methane gas as a byproduct. So undigested proteins, anything that we don't sort of get our hands on there, can be broken down into some sort of simpler structures. And also bilirubin, it gets broken down from bile. So I haven't spoken about bile yet. But basically that bilirubin is being broken down. We've also got stercobilin. So this is a byproduct of heme. So heme is in our red blood cells. So that is the main group that is responsible for transporting red blood cells. So basically what we're seeing here is a lot of the heme breakdown there will be a byproduct, and that actually causes the change in color to that sort of browny color of feces. Now we also see absorption of water. We're trying to, again, our aim of the game here is to absorb as many things as we can. We don't want things to go to waste, because our body, especially our gut, it does not know when our next meal will be, okay? It is in terms of the history of life, we have not always had a Woolworths or a Coles or an IGA or a convenience store down the road to rely upon. So typically when you eat that meal, you want to really get your money's worth. You want to absorb as much as possible, because you don't know when your next meal will be, essentially. So let's just talk briefly about water, okay? Because again, water is one of the most important things that we are absorbing and that we absolutely need in order to survive. So 9 liters of fluid on average, again, is dumped into our GI tract. This obviously varies a lot. See, I drink a lot of water because for me especially, this is talking about absorption of water, but we're going to talk about fluid balance when we get to the kidneys. But for me especially, I lose a lot of water by talking, okay, by speech. So as I was mentioning to you guys in week 4, when we are breathing in and breathing out, we are humidifying that air that is coming in. So because I'm talking so much, I actually lose a lot of that moisture. I lose a lot of water just through the moisture in my breath. So I constantly have to, replenish that. So with this 9 liters of fluid, okay, like we have our saliva, as we mentioned, that's 1 to 1.5 liters a day. The ingestion of liquids, you know, we've got that 2.3 liters. Again, these are all average sort of values. Don't take that too much to heart, but you get the point here. Okay, we've got these gastric juices, we've got bile that's being released, we've got these pancreatic juices, and these intestinal juices that are all moving in, and then within the small intestines we are absorbing a lot of that water back out, and in the large intestines, anything that's sort of left over, we really try to scoop up that last liter. Okay, obviously some fluid will be lost as feces, which is fine, but we still try to grab as much as we can. So what we're seeing here now, as we move down into the rectum here, basically what is hitting this stage is predominantly waste. So when this is beginning to get full, what we are seeing is that the rectum will begin to stretch. And what that is going to do is essentially trigger those stretch receptors and basically you know, tell your body, hey, we got some stuff here. We kind of need to think about getting rid of that. Do I ever lose my voice? No, I'm quite lucky with that, actually. It's exceptional. Oh, that does fit. That is exceptionally rare that I lose my voice. I've lost my voice twice, I think, in my life. And one was when I was teaching, and I basically just had to squeak for the entire lecture, and it was incredibly funny / humiliating. But no, I'm one of the lucky ones where my voice is very loud. So what we're seeing here with our rectum and the anal cavity here is that we have 2 sphincters. Okay, so the internal sphincter, once our rectum begins to get full, will then relax, but our external sphincter, this is voluntary. Now, again, we're very grateful for that. We are grateful for this voluntary control of our internal anal sphincter. Why? Because that gives us control over our defecation. Because the last thing you want to do is to be sitting here enjoying this wonderful, enthralling, encapsulating anatomy and physiology lecture, and then suddenly go, oh dear, I crap my pants. Okay, so this gives us control over that defecation, and you know, it is obviously very important. Now, what is also important too here is this blood supply that leads to our rectum and the lower third of our large intestine, because what's important there is that there is no hepatic portal system, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in a moment, but it basically means that it dodges a lot. It means it doesn't go directly to the liver in terms of the substances that are being absorbed. But again, I'm gonna talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Okay, so let us now talk about some of our accessory organs. These are the things that really help out and promote a lot of this digestion. Now, the liver and the gallbladder, incredibly important. Now, the liver is huge, okay? It weighs 1.5 kilos. The liver has so many different functions. It has a wide myriad of different functions, but I'm only going to be talking about a handful today. Now, what we're seeing here is our liver, and we're also looking at our gallbladder. Now, some of you might have even had your gallbladder removed, which that's fine. But what the gallbladder does is it works as like a storage container for bile. Now, as we can see here by this common bile duct, the the gallbladder and our liver are connected by these tubes leading down to our duodenum. So, okay. Yeah, right. We'll talk a little bit about the liver, then we'll move on to bile. So these liver cells, now these are called hepatocytes. So hepato, or the hepatic system, that is the liver, and cyte simply means cell. So hepatocyte simply translates into liver cell. Now, these liver cells essentially are very well positioned to take in these substances, such as nutrients and different medications, because when we are absorbing things from the GIT, it will typically go straight through to the liver. And the reason for that is that the liver has a large role in terms of synthesizing various things. It's also our massive area of detoxification, okay, to help get rid of anything that shouldn't be there. So looking at our blood supply now to the liver, okay, so the liver will receive blood from the hepatic portal vein, which is going to bring nutrient-rich blood from the GIT, except for the lower 2/3 of the rectum. This is draining straight into our iliac vein, but not through this hepatic portal. This is important for delivery of certain medication because this is a suppository, and that is because it will avoid this hepatic portal system. So what we are seeing here is that the oxygenated blood from our hepatic artery and this nutrient-rich but deoxygenated blood that's coming from the hepatic portal will mix into these liver sinusoids. So if I just and what that is going to do is going to connect to our hepatic vein there. Okay, it's going to move through that liver and then connect straight through into our inferior vena cava and go back into circulation. Now, what is important here is that the hepatic portal vein, it's technically not a true vein, okay? Because it's moving blood to the liver and not the heart. So remember how I always said the, weeks 1 and 2 especially, I said, arteries go away from the heart, veins go towards the heart. So the hepatic portal vein is technically not a true vein in that regard because it's not going directly to the heart. It's going to the liver and then from the liver going back to the heart there. So looking now at what some of the main functions of the liver are, okay, it does a whole lot of different stuff. So we've got our carbohydrate metabolism. So we're taking these carbohydrates and breaking them down or building them up, okay, to help us to control our blood glucose levels. This obviously works closely with our pancreas to help accomplish this. We have our lipid metabolism. So this is the synthesis of our various lipoproteins, synthesis of cholesterol, which again is incredibly important in our lipid bilayer there, and looking at cell signaling especially. Protein metabolism, again, to take these amino acids and construct them together into various proteins. It's also incredibly important to convert. Our body has the ability to convert one amino acid to another amino acid. Not all 20. We have our essential and non-essential amino acids. So, but again, if we are running low on one type of amino acid, we can take another one and convert them. Processing of certain drugs and certain hormones, again, detoxifying. This is helping to remove things that our body deems that it does not want in the body. This can sometimes be exceptionally difficult in terms of looking at various medications. This is why some medications can be taken as a tablet. Okay, we can, find a way to chemically get around this, or indeed use what the liver is doing kind of against it and get it to help create the drug that we are wanting to administer. Or there are some things that can only be administered by a suppository, putting it under the tongue, that sort of thing, to help avoid the liver for as much as possible before it gets broken down. processing and excretion of bilirubin. Okay, so when we're breaking down our old red blood cells, okay, that we don't need anymore. Okay, this bilirubin is a byproduct and we get rid of it by putting it into the bile. And this bile is then moving into our small intestines and is then released in the body, especially as waste. Synthesis of these bile acids, which are very important for breaking down our lipids. It also works as a nutrient store, okay, storing things like glycogen, which again, I'm going to talk about a lot more next week. And then phagocytosis. So this is looking at essentially, breaking down, like looking at the immune system a little bit. And of course, activation of our vitamin D. So let us look now at bile. What is bile doing? So we produce around a liter of bile a day, and the pH of bile is 7.6 to 8.6. Now, this is quite important, and the reason for that is if we look at the liver and the gallbladder, which the liver produces bile, and if you have one, will store it in the gallbladder down here. What is then going to happen is when these stretch receptors, and so these mechanoreceptors and our chemoreceptors in the duodenum are detecting, hey, that chunk of food has moved down into our small intestines. Let's get to work. One of the main things that will be released is bile. Now, again, bile is incredibly important because it has a higher pH. Now, as I mentioned, as it's moving from the stomach into our duodenum, it's very acidic. It's come straight from the stomach. It's like a pH 2. So we need to do something about that. This is why our bile is slightly more alkaline, okay, slightly basic. It's to help neutralize it. So it contains a lot of different things. It contains water. It contains some ions, bile acids. So these bile acids here help to take this fat globule. Oops, I forgot to put myself back up. Sorry. Take these fat globules here and we'll break them down into these smaller globules to help with pancreatic lipase to further break those down there. So again, bile, incredibly important for helping us neutralize the contents of our stomach as it's moving through into our duodenum. And it also helps in terms of emulsification. So again, emulsification is taking this big globule and breaking them down into smaller little globules here. Okay, so this part is important here. So what we see here is that bile is being produced, stored in the gallbladder here, and then it just hangs out there until it receives a stimulus to be released into our duodenum. Now, there are two main hormones that are being released here. The first one is secretin. Second one is CCK. So CCK stands for cholecystokinin. Yeah, cholecystokinin. Very important. So when our stomach releases that content through that pyloric sphincter and that chyme moves into our duodenum here, what's going to happen is a lot of those chemoreceptors are going to detect presence of amino acids, presence of, fats and sugars, all sorts of different things there. And it's going to go, whoa, hey, okay, we're really acidic and there's heaps of nutrients here. We have food or chyme that is now on the way through. Quick, go, go, go. And it's going to secrete CCK. And then CCK will then go to the gallbladder and the liver. And what that is going to do is basically trigger this to constrict and release more bile down into this duodenum, which again will help to neutralize things. It's helping to emulsify things and help facilitate further chemical digestion and help to neutralize the acidity there to so that we're not essentially damaging our small intestines. So 80% of the bile acids are reabsorbed in the terminal ileum and returns to the liver. So basically, again, waste not, want not. We don't want to waste things, okay? So what we will do is once we that bile moves through with our chyme, through our small intestines, it will then be reabsorbed. It will then go back to the liver and will be recycled. Now, 20% of that bile will also be removed. Okay, we don't absorb all of it. And this is the body's only way of eliminating excess cholesterol. Okay, so this is how we can remove some of those waste products that we don't need anymore. Good. So, I've spent a bit of time now talking about the liver. We've been talking about the pancreas, okay? The liver and the small intestines, but I also want to talk a little bit about the pancreas. So, the pancreas sits sort of underneath the stomach. I had a good image before. Here we go. So we've got the liver here. We've got this duodenum. So the stomach is basically connected here, and that's where we can see our pancreas. And the pancreas is also connected into our duodenum down here. Go. Now, the pancreas has both exocrine and endocrine glands. So these exocrine glands, which are again, exocrine relies on ducts, and these connect to the duodenum, and they produce a lot of various digestive pancreatic juices. Very, very important, which again, I'm going to talk about a little bit later today and a whole lot next week. Now, these endocrine glands, these are from our pancreatic isolates, and this is where we see the control of our blood sugar levels. So things like insulin and glucagon, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So this is how we control our blood sugar levels. So again, you know, the pancreas is an accessory organ to digestion. It also has many other different roles here. Don't worry too much, guys, about labeling the pancreas. I'm not going to really grill you guys on that. What I'm basically showing you here is the positioning of the pancreas compared especially to the liver and how it's sort of connecting to our duodenum down here. So we can see these ducts here that are connecting from the liver, from the gallbladder down here, connecting via these bile ducts. They also combine here with these pancreatic ducts, obviously from our pancreas, so that they both will combine and join into our small intestines up here. Now, pancreatic juices. Okay, what is involved in here? So it has, again, water, has some water in here. It also has some salts, and it has bicarbonate ions. Why does it have bicarbonate ions, and why is that important? What's important here is that it is alkaline, okay? It is basic. What that means is that, again, similar to how bile was helping to neutralize our chyme's pH, it's come straight from the stomach. It's come straight from the stomach, boop, and then come straight down here into our duodenum. So we need to neutralize it ASAP so that it is not damaging any of the tissues down here. So it's neutralizing this gastric chyme, and it's stopping the action of pepsin. So remember, up in our stomach, pepsinogen is converted to pepsin via the change in pH because it's very acidic. So we stop that, we turn off that enzyme because we have now made the environment in the duodenum pretty close to neutral, okay? We've kind of neutralized that out. Now, the pancreas also has its own myriad of digestive enzymes. So when we started off in the mouth, okay, we had salivary amylase. Our salivary amylase here was helping to chemically break down carbohydrates. Now, we then swallowed that bolus, and that bolus went down into our stomach, and it then was mixed and churned around, turning it into chyme. But the byproduct of that is that salivary amylase was destroyed. So, okay, when it's destroyed, what are we supposed to do? Well, once our chyme moves from our stomach into our duodenum down here, Once it gets nice and neutralized, we also have our pancreatic amylase. And again, this continues that carbohydrate breakdown. Now it says carbohydrate starch breakdown. What's important to keep in mind here, guys, is that starch is a type of carbohydrate. So we break down those carbohydrates based on, or thanks to, pancreatic amylase. You also have trypsin, chymotrypsin, and procarboxypeptidase. So again, trypsin and chymotrypsin, these are the annoying little exceptions to our little enzyme rule, how they don't end in A's. But these are proteolytic enzymes. So proteo meaning protein, and lytic meaning lysis, meaning to split. So these function to chop and break down proteins in different parts, so like different kinds of scissors, I guess you could think of it, and we'll chop and break them down so that we break them down into their original component, which is our amino acids. So we take these proteins, chop them up, so we have our amino acids, and we absorb those amino acids, take them to the liver so that we can then synthesize our own proteins based upon our own body's needs. The next one I want to talk about is pancreatic lipase. So again, pancreatic meaning pancreas, and lipase. Lip means lipid, ase means enzyme. So pancreatic lipase functions to help enzymatically break down these triglycerides. So triglycerides is the storage form of fat. Now the last one, which I'm going to be talking about the least out of all of these, this is deoxyribonuclease and ribonuclease. And what this does is it helps to break down genetic material. It breaks down DNA and RNA, stuff like that. This will not be a large focus for me in our lectures. I will predominantly be focusing on these ones. Okay, when we eat something, we are looking predominantly at its protein value, at its carbohydrate value, or at its fat value. We don't really look at food and go, wonder how much DNA is in this bad boy. It's not a huge focus for us. However, it is important because we do need those nucleic acids. So, yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about these two. These ones will be much more of my focus. Okay, this slide is a goodie. I like this one. Okay, what we're seeing here is that as we have our stomach, so this is kind of pulling everything all together. So we have our stomach here. We can see we've got sort of that retropulsion that's pushing the contents back up, but a little bit of it has kind of seeped through. This is our chyme. And as this chyme is hitting our duodenum down here, these chemoreceptors and these mechanoreceptors are going, hey, whoa, we have chyme in here. Let's get to work. And what we're going to see here is the release of two main hormones, okay, which you need to know these. We have CCK, or cholecystokinin, and we have secretin. Now what secretin does is that it triggers the pancreas to, on top of the pancreatic juices that we were talking about before, release bicarbonate, okay? Bicarbonate and water. Basically, this is very alkaline, so it's very basic. And what this does is it really helps. So secretin on top of this water and bicarbonate on top of these pancreatic juices, on top of these bile, all three of those function to help neutralize that acid, okay? We want to neutralize it. And of course we have our cholecystokinin, CCK. Now CCK is released, and what that CCK is doing is it's triggering the release of bile from our gallbladder and from our liver, and it's also triggering that the pancreas to release those pancreatic juices. So like we were looking at over here, okay, that cholecystokinin releasing and causing breakdown of carbohydrates, breakdown of proteins, breakdown of fats, okay? This is where we really see a big step into our chemical breakdown, okay? The pancreas really hooks in and really helps us out here. So again, just to reiterate, CCK helps activate the gallbladder, activate the liver, activate the pancreas to release all of these lovely digestive juices to really help in neutralizing the content of this chyme and to really push forward and facilitate this chemical digestion. Secretin, again, releases water and bicarbonate, okay? That's HCO3 minus, that is bicarbonate. That helps us to release that from the pancreas to help neutralize it, because we don't want it to be super acidic, because it's going to break all of our lovely brush border enzymes, and it's going to damage our tissue, which of course we don't want. Okay, so we have covered a lot of stuff, okay? We've really gone through. So what have we done? So again, we've started at the top here. Chew, 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 crunch, crunch, crunch. What is happening here? Okay, we've got this mechanical digestion that is occurring in the mouth. We've got this chemical digestion that is occurring in the mouth. So this mechanical crunching, pushing, grinding, this chemical digestion breaking down these carbohydrates. It then moves down into our stomach, okay? I'm going to talk about these slides a little bit more next week, so don't worry too much about them. From the stomach, we then have that really low pH, so it's very acidic. We got further mechanical digestion occurring there. This is where we see some various hormones, like we've got trypsin coming into play to help break down proteins, but a lot of it too is that really low pH and plus further mechanical digestion. That chyme will then move through that pyloric sphincter into the duodenum. Go back to here, this will do. Then from our stomach into the through the pyloric sphincter into our duodenum. And from here, the contents of our bile is being neutralized, okay, by this bicarbonate. Thank you to secretin and CCK, cholecystokinin. And we are seeing the release of many other pancreatic digestive juices, such as pancreatic amylase. Okay, that amylase is breaking down carbohydrates. Chymotrypsin, trypsin, pro-carboxypeptidase, these are all breaking down our proteins. And pancreatic lipase is working to break down our fats, breaking them down as much as we can so that our brush border enzymes here in our microvilli will scoop them up and absorb them, okay? Moving them through our hepatic portal to the liver to be processed, to be detoxified, and then circulated around the body. This will then continue all the way through into our large intestines, where we start to scoop up any remaining nutrients, anything that our small intestines hasn't gotten yet. This is where our microflora in our gut really steps into gear and really helps us to break down things that we cannot break down ourselves. This is also where we put waste into our GIT, things that we don't want, so that when it gets to the end, to our rectum and anal, basically anal cavity there, and it then is released as waste. Okay. How are we going, guys? How are we feeling? Hopefully we're going okay. Hopefully we haven't gotten too cross-eyed on me. So what should we be able to do here? You guys should be able to recognize a lot of the histological structures that we have gone through with our GIT. You should know what the physiological process is in terms of digestion, absorption, and secretion. Okay, we're focused a lot on that digestion and absorption, okay, how we break things down. Look at motility, okay, how is it that we are able to move and push things around our GIT? Look at the things that are being secreted. Okay, looking at this acidity, looking at, these various enzymes that are being released to break down these substances to help us absorb it. Now, we haven't really spoken about the functional importance of these major nutrients and vitamins, because we're going to do that next week. Are there any questions, anyone? Or is there anything that you would like me to go over again? It is a lot, I know. Don't worry though, we'll be going through it again, and we'll be breaking it down and sort of going through it in our tute workshop tomorrow morning. So awesome stuff, guys, awesome stuff. So this video will hopefully be done, hopefully not too late, and I will put that up on the portal for you guys to watch. Again, tomorrow we'll have a bit more of a chat about this. We'll have a little bit more of a chat about your mid-trimester exam. I'll sort of let you know where I'm at with that. But yeah, other than that, guys, look, have a lovely day, study hard, do your best, and I will see you all tomorrow.
It's over, but never give it away.